The air inside the arena usually hums with a predictable electricity, a mixture of high-pitched cheers and the rhythmic chanting of names. But tonight, the atmosphere has curdled into something unrecognizable. It is a heavy, stagnant silence that feels more like an interrogation than a celebration. In the ring, the current champion stands victorious, but the usual triumphant music hasn't played. Instead, the lighting has dimmed to a sickly, bruised purple, casting long, jagged shadows across the canvas. The commentators have stopped talking. There is no frantic play, no forced hype, just the audible sound of a headset being placed on a desk and the distant, muffled cough of a fan 3 rows back. This isn't the practiced, surprised silence of a staged return. It is the genuine, uncomfortable quiet of a crowd that feels like it's being watched by something it cannot see. Security guards at the bottom of the ramp are looking at each other, their postures rigid, clearly receiving instructions in their ears that aren't part of the standard operating procedure. People in the front row aren't holding up their phones to record. They're leaning forward, squinting into the darkness of the tunnel, their faces tight with a sudden, unexplainable anxiety. The Jumbotron remains pitch black, devoid of the neon graphics or flashy logos that usually herald a Titan's arrival. The only light comes from the flickering exit signs and the faint glow of the ring posts. The uncertainty is palpable, a cold draft moving through the thousands in attendance. You can hear the hum of the cooling fans in the rafters, a mechanical drone that only emphasizes the lack of human noise. When a single, distorted note finally tears through the speakers, it isn't a familiar riff. It is a low, dissonant chord that vibrates in the chest, sounding more like a warning siren than a theme song. The crowd doesn't roar. They gasp, a collective intake of breath that sounds like a sob. The champion in the ring isn't looking at the stage with defiant bravado. She is backing away, her eyes wide, one hand gripping the top rope as if to steady herself against a sudden shift in the earth. The silence has been broken, but the sound that replaced it is far more terrifying than the quiet ever was. As the dissonant hum reaches a fever pitch, a figure emerges from the curtain. But there is no pyrotechnic display, no smoke machine to mask the entrance. She simply walks into the dim light, and the visual is jarring. Becky Lynch doesn't look like the superhero the world remembers. There are no bright colors, no steampunk goggles, no Defiant the Man branding. She is dressed in a stark, utilitarian black coat, her hair pulled back so tightly it looks painful. Her face is a mask of controlled, icy intensity, devoid of the theatrical smirk or the fire that used to define her. She moves slowly, each step deliberate and heavy, as if she is carrying the physical weight of the 2 years she spent away from this ring. The crowd is divided in a way that feels visceral. Half are standing in a stunned, respectful silence, while the other half are whispering, a low-frequency buzz of confusion and disbelief. This isn't a homecoming. It's an intrusion. The cameras struggle to catch her eyes because she isn't looking at the lenses. She is looking through the ring, through the champion, and into a middle distance that no one else can see. The commentary team finally finds their voices, but they aren't shouting. Their tones are hushed, almost reverent, as if they are afraid that speaking too loudly might shatter the fragile reality of the moment. One announcer whispers her name, not as a call to action, but as a question. The realization is beginning to sink in that this version of Becky Lynch is a stranger. The way she carries herself, shoulders slumped slightly forward, hands buried deep in her pockets, suggests someone who has been through a war that didn't happen on television. As she reaches the bottom of the ramp, she doesn't slap any hands. She doesn't acknowledge the signs held up by children who have waited years to see her. She stops at the steel steps and stares at the ring apron, her breathing shallow and visible. The tension in the building is no longer about excitement. It's about the fear of what she is going to say or do. When she finally steps into the ring, she doesn't go to the turnbuckle to pose. She stands in the center, a solitary black pillar in a sea of confused faces, and the silence returns, deeper and more suffocating than before. While the world stares at the flickering image of the ring, the scene behind the curtain is one of absolute, unmitigated chaos. The arrival of Becky Lynch wasn't on the script, and the panic among the road agents and producers is visible to anyone standing near the gorilla position. Veteran wrestlers who have seen everything stand frozen by the monitors, their faces reflecting the same grim realization as the fans in the arena. There is no welcome back committee waiting. Instead, there is a wall of resentment. The locker room had moved on. In the 2 years of her absence, new hierarchies were built, new stars were minted, and the shadow she once cast had finally begun to fade. Her sudden reappearance isn't seen as a boost to the roster. It's seen as a threat to the stability they've fought to maintain. Young performers who grew up idolizing her now look at the screen with a mixture of awe and defensive anger. They know that her presence changes the gravity of the entire company, and not everyone is ready to be pulled back into her orbit. The tension spills over into the hallways. Cameras capture a glimpse of a top executive shouting into a phone, their face flushed with a mixture of rage and panic. This wasn't a planned debut, it was a breach. Rumors begin to fly instantly through the media scrums and the digital wires. Was she even under contract? How did she get past the heightened security of the 2026 tour? The professional facade of the WWE is cracking in real time. In the trainer's room, a prominent star is seen throwing a chair across the floor, the sound of splintering wood echoing the fracture in the company's narrative. The legacy she left behind was one of revolution, but the legacy she is creating in this moment feels like a demolition. Backstage, the air is thick with the smell of ozone and nervous sweat. People are talking in hushed, frantic circles, trying to figure out if this is a hostile takeover or a desperate plea for relevance. The hierarchy is dead, and as Becky stands in the ring, people who actually run the show realize they have lost control of the one thing they value most: the ending of the story. As the initial shock of the return begins to settle into a cold reality, the focus shifts to the woman herself and the devastating price she has paid to stand in that ring once more. This isn't just about wrestling. It's about the psychological toll of a career built on being the man in a world that eventually tries to break everyone. Close-ups of Becky's face reveal the fine lines of exhaustion and the hardness in her eyes that wasn't there in 2024. The media begins to dig into the private struggles that kept her away, the whispers of family strain, the weight of a legacy that demanded she be perfect at the expense of being human. For months, she had been a ghost, a name mentioned in hushed tones during contract negotiations and Where Are They Now podcasts. Now, the physical reality of her presence is a reminder of everything she sacrificed. Her return isn't a victory lap. It's a reckoning with the person she had to become to survive this industry and the person she lost along the way. The pressure of her legacy is no longer a badge of honor. It is a cage. Every move she makes is analyzed not for its athletic grace, but for what it says about her mental state. The fans who once cheered her every word are now hesitant, sensing that they are witnessing someone who has reached their breaking point. The personal consequences are starting to manifest in public view. Reports surface of strained relationships with peers who felt abandoned during the company's leanest years. The narrative is no longer about the man coming around. It's about a woman who has realized that the mountain she climbed has no oxygen at the top. She looks at the championship belt held by the woman across from her, not with greed, but with a weary, ancestral recognition. It is a cursed object, and the crowd can feel her internal conflict. Does she really want this back, or is she just here because she doesn't know how to be anyone else? The emotional depth of the moment transcends the sport, touching on the universal fear of returning to a life that no longer has a place for you. When Becky finally reaches for the microphone, the sound of her breath hitting the mesh is like a thunderclap. She doesn't speak for a long time. She just stands there, looking at the thousands of people who are waiting for a catchphrase that will never come. When she finally speaks, her voice is a low, rasping shadow of its former self. She doesn't talk about titles. She doesn't talk about the man. She talks about the silence of the last 2 years and the way the lights in this arena never truly go out in her mind. She looks directly into the camera, and for a split second, the cold mask slips, revealing a raw, terrifying vulnerability. She asks the audience a single question that hangs in the air like a terminal diagnosis. Did you want me back because you loved me, or because you wanted to watch me break one last time? The impact of the words is devastating. It turns the entire spectacle of professional wrestling back on the viewer, accusing them of being complicit in the destruction of the icons they claim to adore. The screen fades to black before the champion can respond, before the music can play, and before the crowd can find a way to react. The video ends not with a to be continued or a hype package for the next show, but with that single haunting question echoing in the silence. It leaves the viewer with a profound sense of unease. This wasn't a viral moment designed to sell tickets. It was a mirror held up to the entire culture of fandom. As the credits roll in your mind, you realize that the shocking return of Becky Lynch in 2026 wasn't the start of a new chapter. It forces you to wonder if we ever really knew her at all, or if we just liked the version of her that was convenient for our entertainment. The emotional weight stays with you long after the screen goes dark, making you realize that some returns aren't about coming home. They are about realizing that home is a place that no longer exists.